Okay, welcome to day 2 of our 3 months course. I hope everyone is good and ready to start. Right. So, for today's lecture, we'll be looking at the input function, knowing the difference between strings, integers, and floats, convert user input into numbers using int and float, display information using string formatting and f strings, and then upgrade yesterday's task manager into a structured task entry system. Right. I hope everyone is now ready to start today's lecture.
Yeah, it's okay. You will start.
Okay. So I'll create another file, call it task manager 2.py. Right. I'll copy yesterday's code. Right. And paste it here. Right. Right. So we still all remember how the input function works, correct? Right. Anyone who has forgotten how the input function?
I remember.
Okay, so you all still remember. That's great. So imagine, right, you are working at a software company and your manager tells you that you need to fix the login page. Right? Then you look at this information. It's not enough information, right? So you also need to know the task, the task, right? The description, priority, and estimated time on how long the task is going to take, right? So professional task management systems don't only store the task name; they store many details. And so today we're going to improve our project so that it behaves more like a real application. Right. So yesterday we only asked one question: input, enter your task. Right. So today I want us to modify it to ask more questions. Right. So we are going to ask for the description. Right. Input, enter the task description. Right. We also want the task name. Right. Input, enter task name. Right. And then priority. Input, enter task priority. Right. And then the estimated time. First we input, enter estimated time, right? So Python is going to read the first input, which is on line 5, and when the user enters the input, it moves on to line 6, line 7, line 8, line 9, and so on, right? After the line 9, it's also going to move what on to these print what functions and print our menu, right? So here we added what new 4 variables: task name, description, priority, and estimated time. So each of these what variables have different responsibilities, right? So everything entered using the input function, it returns what a string, right? The input what function returns a string. So whenever a user enters something here, it's going to return a string. So by default, the input function, it returns what? A string, right? So let's say we want the user to enter an age. An example input, enter your age, right? But if the user enters their age here, it's not going to be a number, it's going to be a string. So right, so a string, right, a string is text, right? So we call a string what? Characters in Python. For things like your name, your surname, like anything that is not numbers, that is just words, those are characters. It's a string, right? So when you, like for example, task name, description, this is a string. And in Python we declare strings using what? Double quotation marks. So whenever you see these double quotation marks, always know that you are working with what? With a string, right? So when you see these double quotation marks, always know that you're working with a string, right? So here we'll ask, for example, on line 19, if we ask the end user to input their age, that means that even if the user inputs 20, it's not going to be a number. Python will regard it as a string. That's because what? By default, an input function returns a string, right? So Python did not actually store what? A number. Python stored a text in a number format, right? So for example, Python didn't store, let's say the user entered what? 20. Python didn't store 20, but instead it stored 20 in this format as a string, not as a number, right? So we have what you call type conversion in what? In Python, right? So sometimes, yes, you can use this age input, enter age, and the user enters 20 and save it as a string. That works, but sometimes we need what? Real numbers, right? I don't need what? Strings. I need what? Real numbers. So that means that we have to convert this input function from returning a string into what? Into an integer, right? So are we all still together? Any questions so far? Okay, so no questions. Great. So we have what we call data types in Python. Data types. So So we have what we call strings, right? Strings are something like this, text, right? We have what we call an int, right, which is what, whole numbers. Then we have what we call floats, which are what, numbers with what, decimals. And for decimals, we don't use a comma, we use what, a dot, we use a full stop. Then we have what, booleans, right, which is what, it can be either true or false. A boolean returns what, true or false. The first letter is always what, a capital letter. Right. So if you want to convert what, our input function to accept what, an integer or a float or a boolean, instead of what, defaulting to a string, we have to before you call your input function, you have to declare the data type that you're going to use, right? For example, we have h1 equals to int. So when you say int, by default Python is going to know that, okay, so now we're expecting what, an integer. So it's int followed by what, round brackets, right? And then inside those round brackets, I can then now call my input function and ask the user to enter their age, right? Let me comment this out, right? So here, when like on line 21 h1, when the user input enters their age, Python is only going to expect an integer. It won't expect what, a string or any character. It's only going to expect what, an integer, right? So let me show you what I mean. Print age and then print h1. Okay, so I'm now running the code. Enter age. So this is the first input function on line 19, right? If I say 20, right, it printed 20. When you look at when you see it on the terminal, you might think that this is what, a number, but in reality it's not a number. It's what, it's a string, because by default what, the input function returns a string, right? And then we have this second input function, right? So since Python expects what, an int, right, if I say, let's say hj, I'm going to get an error because Python was expecting a number and my input was not a number, right? I'm now running the code again, right? So for h1, we're saying enter your age. If I say hj, see, we're not getting an error because Python accepts this. It's not expecting a number, it's just expecting a string. It's expecting any character. So even if when I'm working with my code, if I just say input enter your age and the user makes a mistake and enters something that's not a number, Python will accept it. But here with this int data type, if I say hj, like on our previous test, we're going to get an error. But if I enter a real number, right, our program is going to run flawlessly, no errors, right? Same goes for, let's say h2, let's say price equals to float input enter the price, right? Oh, let me comment this out. Print price, right? I'm now running the code. So on the first input function, enter age, it's expecting what? A string, not what? A number. Also, I'll just say a as before, so that you guys can still see the difference between what? An integer and a string, right? And then here we're on our second print statement. We have what? Enter the price. If I say AA, we're going to get an error because what? Because if Python was expecting what? A number with decimal points or just a whole number, right? So I'm going to run the code again. First one, I'm going to say AA again, and then enter the price. If I say 20.5, right, our code is going to run flawlessly, right? So remember that the word int, it stands for integer. Int stands for integer. A float is a number with decimal points, right? And then true, and then a boolean, it only returns true or false. It only returns two values. It can either be true or it can either be what? False. Right. So then we have what we call f strings, right? Within our strings we have what we call what? F strings, right? So let's say right. So an f string, right, it's a string that allows you to combine a variable in strings, right? So here let's say we have a string 1 equals to my let's call it Brandon, right? If I want to say my name is Brandon, right? For example, here I have another string that says that my name is, right? So I've already declared what this string 1 variable, and it already has the value Brandon, so that I don't have to rewrite it here, right? So I can just what? Call what? This variable. So I can combine what? A string with a variable, right? So for example, that means I would need, before I write my double quotation marks, right, I would need to write a small letter f, right? F. So when Python sees this f, is going to know that this is what is an f string, right? So it's just what? Small letter f followed by double quotation marks, and then you write to a string within those double quotation marks, right? Then inside those double quotation marks, you can now then call your variable using these curly braces, right? So inside the curly braces, that is when you can now what? Call your variable. So with an f string, we can combine strings and variables into one line, right? So this f stands for formatted, right? So the f stands for formatted. right? So anything that's inside these curly braces is replaced by the value stored inside what? Our variable. Okay, so any questions with f strings? Yes, Mr. Lupangwa.
Sir, may you please repeat your last statement? You said everything inside the cabin. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I said, can you please repeat your last? May you please repeat your last statement?
Okay,
You said
about this.
anything within the curly brackets is represented. I didn't get the last part.
Okay, so everything inside these curly braces, right, is replaced by the value of the string. So the value is this. So it's replaced by the value of the string. So when you're writing your f string, you're going to just write the variable of the string, but Python is not going to just see the variable, it's going to see the value within that string. Okay, do you get it?
Understood, sir.
Understood. Okay, so back to our project. Right, so let me comment this out. Right, so we already have what? The task name, description, priority, and the estimated what? Time, right? So our estimated time is supposed to be what? A float, because the user is supposed to enter 2,5 3,5 hours, right? So now how do we change this estimated time into a float instead of this string, so that our input function can expect a float instead of a string? Anyone who wants to take a guess? Can you guys see my screen? All right, so I was saying that estimated time, right? We're expecting the user to enter a float, like maybe 2.5, 1.5, or 3.5. So how would we do that? Remember that the input function returns a string by default. So how would we change it from expecting a string to expecting a float? Anyone who wants to tell us? Anyone? Okay, remember that by default the input function returns a string, right? So if you want to change the data type that's going to be returned by the input function, you have to write the name of the data type that you expect at the beginning of your input function, then open your round brackets, right? So your input function is supposed to be inside the round brackets of what? The data type. Okay. Do you all understand that part?
Yes, we are getting that one.
Very sure, sir.
Okay, so no one has issues with converting the input function from expecting a string to expecting what? An integer, a float, or any other data type. Right. So, right here, I want us to be able to print what? The input that the user is going to put into input, right? So you have what? Task details, right? So I want us to print what? The task name, right? And I also want us to print what? The description, print what? And also print the priority. Print the estimated what? Time, right? So in order for us to print the task name, the description, priority, and estimated time, we're supposed to print what? These 4 variables. How can we do that? How can we combine our strings with what? These 4 variables? What can we do to combine these the string and what? The 4 variables? Anyone? Anyone to take a guess? Okay. So remember that to combine what? A string and a variable, we use what you call what? An F string. We use what you call an F string. And to write an F string, before these quotation marks, right, you're supposed to have the letter what? F at the beginning, right? And then within those double quotation marks, these 2, 1, 2, you can now then write what? Your curly braces, and then inside the curly braces, you can then now call the variable name, right? You can now call it the variable, right? So do you all understand how to create an F string and how to call an F string? Anyone who is a bit lost with what? With F strings? Anyone? So no one has issues with what? With an F string. we are all on the same page.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, great. So now before I run the code, right, what do you think okay, let me run it. Let's say the task name is student manager, right? The task description, let's just say check the student who attended, let's say the lecture, right? The priority is high. Estimated hours, let's just say 1,5, right? If I press enter right now, what do we think is going to be printed by these 4 print functions?
I think all the values which you have written.
So it's going to print out student manager, check the student who attended the lecture, high, and 1.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's find out. Exactly. That is what was printed. Right. So anyone with a question about today's lecture, any question about data types and the string formatting? Any question? So always remember that input always returns a string. So a string is just text, right? We use int, right? We use int, right, to convert text into whole numbers. We use floats to convert numbers into decimal numbers, right? And we use what? An f string, a formatted string that lets us insert variable values using what? The curly braces, right? So this is the end of our lecture for today. Does anyone have a question?
Sorry, it's not a question, but maybe I will need you to just have a look at my environment. It's not coming out like yours, so maybe after the lecture, if you are available.
By not coming out, you mean the colors?
Not the colors, like this area where the boot camp to task manager. I'm failing to have a list like that you have.
Okay. So after the lecture, then you shouldn't. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
okay. So anyone with a question before we can end today's lecture? Okay. So no questions. I guess that's it for today. So I'll see you guys tomorrow at 9 p.m.